Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed."
There'll be some of you for who faith is a childish thing, something you've kind of outgrown as you've matured. Maybe you were dragged along to Sunday school or grew up in a religious family. Probably found elements of faith convincing when you were young, but then it sort of bumps up against a question that you hadn't really thought of, or faces a challenge of circumstance. Life doesn't turn out how you expect, and you find yourself getting talked out of faith because you were never really talked into it. You just kind of absorbed it when you were young and impressionable. When you're faced with those experiences and questions, loss in your life, failure, disappointment, a tiny crack appears. And then the crack widens, a wee niggle, a wee question, gnawing at you. And the crack widens and other cracks join up and the cracks become crumbly bits and the crumbly bits become a gaping hole and the whole edifice begins to fall down. And over the years you find yourself just drifting further and further away from what you used to believe and just losing interest in it generally, and bit by bit you're further and further away, and then you look back and suddenly you're nowhere. What was once so sure and certain is just a wisp, a vapour, gone. Some folks find this process of losing faith liberating. They feel that the shackles have been removed, that scales have finally fallen from their eyes and they're seeing clearly for the first time how things really are, not just how they've been told. You were blinded by religion, but now you can truly see. Quite spiritual language really for an anti-spiritual experience. But more often than not, I think the experience of losing faith, of doubt, is not really satisfying. These doubts creep in and they're not convincing or liberating. You're just less and less sure, less and less convinced of anything. And they don't help you find solid ground that you can plant your feet on and then spring off from into life. You just feel unmoored, uneasy, restless. What's at the root of our doubts? Is it like a cold, dispassionate reason? These facts that you've given me are not convincing and therefore I reject them. Well, maybe, but then why is it the experience of doubt is so unfulfilling? Well, I think it's because it's really something else. When something's true, it's not just true for me or true for you. It's true. It's true for everybody. Like up is there and down is here and gravity reels us all in. It's just true. I can say otherwise, but I'm going to find out pretty quickly what's true if I choose to jump off a building. But often we're not willing to make the response that these true things demand. We don't want to make room in our lives for this truth, but it pokes its way in regardless. Like water pressing in around us, truth seeps in through the gaps, through the cracks, finds its way in, no matter how hard you try to keep it out. And if we're not just willing to give it room, then that becomes very difficult. If this is true, it's something I need to do something about. If those things I used to believe are true, then I can't just put them off. I can't ignore them. I have to act. But if I can push them away, if I can find enough doubt, ignore them for a while, I get myself some wiggle room, then I can live how I like. I can make my own destiny. Why is it you feel dissatisfied with life? Why is it when you put your head on the pillow and it's just you and the dark, do you feel restless, empty? In those quiet moments when you've completed Facebook and you've read all the headlines that there are and you've looked at all your texts for the 100th time and you're alone, truly alone with your thoughts, why does your heart tell you that there must be more to life than this? Deep down you know it. You can feel it. But you also know if you find that bedrock, that solid ground, find what's true, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to do something about it. And so it's easier not to look. So you think about it less often because it's not all that pleasant when you do, and gradually it just moves further and further into the background. Days become weeks, become months, become years, and faith becomes part of who you were, not who you are now. Well, I used to believe, but now, just don't really know. Let me tell you about Thomas. Thomas was a man of faith, a true believer. In fact, he was one of the church's key leaders. Came to faith as an adult, not as a child, and he was all in. He was there at the start, gave up his life to the work, devoted himself full time, gave up everything he had, left it all behind, as committed as you can possibly get. And he saw some incredible things. Religious teaching that actually meant something, not empty words, deep truths that connected with his life there and then, made sense of the world around him, helped him navigate relationships, his work, his destiny, everything. Teaching that was given with such authority, it felt as if he had to listen, given by somebody who really knew what they were talking about, not some kind of puffed up professional celebrity preacher. He saw a commitment to justice that was wider, further, deeper than anything else he'd ever seen before. The marginalised were lifted up, the oppressed given respect and a voice and value. Women given a place of honour in a society where they had no honour and no place. True equals, not just lip service diversity, but true inclusion. Other cultures were respected, their points of view valued. They had space and time to be heard, to matter. Even enemies and those hostile to it were given honour, not this kind of partisan us and them, but a radical inclusivity. And it challenged Thomas, challenged his own prejudices, made him see his own blind spots. But the cracks appeared. Being part of a world-changing movement was great, but then it started to fizzle out. His teacher was stopped after only a few years, driven to an untimely death. Surely this was going to be the end of it all now. The circumstances started to affect him a bit. Those experiences changed him. The doubts niggled and the fears set in. What was once so sure that he had left his entire life behind, at the drop of a hat and never once looked back, now looked more and more questionable. Despite all he'd seen, all he'd done, all he'd experienced, it all started crumbling around him. Had it all been a massive, embarrassing mistake? Had he just been caught up on it, carried along with the hoopla of it all? Could he get his old job back? His faith was starting to crumble. But Easter changes everything. That one single event dwarfs all others. In an instant, Thomas goes from being confused and unsure to rock solid and definite. In a single moment, a single encounter, because of Easter, he can see clearly for the first time. What had seemed so confusing moments ago becomes clear to him. What had seemed so unlikely is pure fact. The scales fall from his eyes and he can see it clearly for the first time. And in that moment, he just falls on his face. He can see that he's been unwilling to let his feet find that solid ground, unwilling to change. But the truth has burst into his life and it's forced a response. So if you've been shaken by doubt, unmoored from your faith, floating free, unsure where to go, what to do, start with Easter. If you know that deep down you've drifted because maybe you weren't willing to make the change, weren't willing to live in light of the truth, look at Easter. Easter takes doubts and swallows them in certainty. It takes confusion and overwhelms it with clarity. Easter gives you a place to stand, solid and sure, no matter what. Easter is something you can build your life on, because Easter changes everything.
Like being hungry, like being cold, the doubtful mind reaches out for wounded flesh to hold. Yeah, everybody claims, but without a bleeding heart to touch, the doubting heart still doubts the same. And the senses that were made to serve me have rendered me a slave. What is believing? What is faith? My fingertips forget the feeling of your saving grace. Yeah, everybody claims. I can only hear the shouts that echo through my faithless frame. Lord, help my unbelief. I no longer wanna be a slave. He is risen, so they say, but I search the shadow corners of the grave, and he is risen with the day, but I cast a shadow in the shape of a body clinging close to clay. Lord, help my unbelief. Something's getting in the way. Lord, help my unbelief. I no longer wanna be a slave. Just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come. Just as I am, thou dost about with many a conflict, many a doubt, fightings and fears within and without. O Lamb of God, I come. just as I